what we're going to do is allow Troy to take us through his world of Capture One. We're not doing any slides here on purpose. Maybe at the end, I'll show a couple of slides. But for the most part, I'm going to turn it over to this guy, and he's just going to pour his knowledge of Capture One upon you. So,
I like
Troy
that.
Miller, how's it going, Troy? How you doing?
It's going really good. Thanks. Thanks for that introduction. Yeah, I came from Lightroom. So for those of you who are maybe using Lightroom or kind of using both or in between, just know that I spent a lot of time in Lightroom and I was this close to being a certified Lightroom instructor. So I spent a lot of time in it before I switched over to Capture One. And it was personal preference at the time, and then now I just love a lot of the features that we'll touch on some of them.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Some folks are asking a couple of questions. Will the session be recorded? Yes, I'm recording right now, and I will email you with a replay to the session probably tomorrow afternoon. But if you want to record it yourself and you're running Zoom, you should be able to just click the record button if you'd like to make your own copy on your own hard drive of this. So have at it. All right, Troy, I'm going to hand the keys over to you, man. I'll be in the chat, chit-chatting back and forth with folks in there, but you have the stage. It's all yours.
Okay. You need to give me permission to share my screen.
Okay, let's do that.
That's the only thing I need.
All right.
And if you guys have any questions as we go, please throw them into the chat, and then Frederick can ping me if I miss them. I've got a big screen of Capture One right here in front of me, and I'm trying to keep an eye on that. And I've got your chat over here, so I don't want to miss anything. So,
okay, I'm trying to give you permission to share your screen. Do you have to ask me first?
No, you have to make me a co-host.
Oh, that would do it. All right, you are now a co-host. Congratulations.
Let's see, can I share? There we go. All right.
All right. And I'm going to bow out behind the curtains.
You got it. All right. So you guys should be able to see my Capture One screen should be appear. Can you see that, Frederick? Is that coming through?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. Beautiful.
Perfect. So really what I thought that I would do is, part of this webinar is to promote the course that I've recorded and that Frederick has in the store. And there's over 4 hours, almost 5 hours worth of content. And so the idea was, let's talk about some of the things about Capture One that I like and how some of them work and how I might use them. And so we're going to jump around a little bit, but I'm just going to touch on some of the newer features and some of the features that I actually use the most. One of the things that is new in the recent version of Capture One is now, if you notice, right next to your folders, there's a number. And that number now represents how many images that you have in that folder. But it also shows in the root how many images you have. So my demo images now have 599 images. And that might seem like a small thing, but that was a big deal to me because I like to manage my images. I kind of know what I have in there. But one of the coolest things was, and this is something that I missed when I switched over from Lightroom, was the ability to synchronize a folder. Now with Capture One, you can actually synchronize a folder. So for example, if I go into this architectural folder, and let's just say that I go to the Finder, show in Finder, and let's say I take this image out. Oops, I'll just select one. Let's say I take that image out of the folder. So this way you can organize your stuff at the root level. So let me move that to trash. Okay. So now I can just right click on architecture and say synchronize, and it says remove one missing. There we go. So now it pulled it out of there. So it updated. So I could do exactly the inverse. So let's say that I want to put a new image in there, or I created a new folder that had that image in there. I could just right click, say synchronize. Now, some of the options that you may want to look at when you come in here is that, do I want to include subfolders? I do. You can also choose to only include the previously added subfolders. And that's kind of important because if you have folders within your folders that you don't want to synchronize into Capture One, maybe you have a contracts folder with PDFs or something, and you don't want that included. This will only synchronize the folders that you've chosen. And then I wanted to import the new images, and you can show the importer or not. And I'll just say yes. And there's the image. So it seems like a little thing, but as far as workflow goes, that's huge. Because usually what I'll do is I'll import my images, throw them into a folder. They live under a root. And then I just synchronize, like right click and synchronize that upper root. And it says, oh, look, you have images to import. I import them and we're good to go. That's been one of the neat features that they've added. One of the latest features that Capture One has just added has been the magic brush. Now, the magic brush is a way of making a selection, and Capture One has a lot of ways of making selections. Like you can select through luminosity, you can select through colors, and these are all things that I cover in the course pretty heavily. But for example, like I can use the color editor under Advanced, grab the color picker, I can select that color range, and you can see right here in the wheel out of that little slice, that's the color that I've chosen. That's our saturation and brightness. You can expand it to select more color. If I check down here, it says view selected color range, everything else goes gray. So that's one way that we're able to make selections, but they just recently added what's called the magic brush, and I'll show you. Let me jump over here to a landscape image, and we'll do, let's do this guy. So there is this image. If you see the course, you'll see that there's one of the demos that I do in here that shows how to use Luma Range to select all these different colors and create all these different layers. Which, in one of the most powerful things that I find in Capture One is the fact that I can actually work with layers. And you can have up to 16 layers in this palette at any one time, and they can do a lot of things. So just to show you real quickly, and if we hit M, that shows our mask, you can see that I've selected the sky, the barn roof, just the tree, just the background, the hill, the foreground. Well, that should have been the grass. There we go. The adjustment layer. We don't need that one. So I'm going to show you how to select all of these. So that would be the grass. And the goal is that you can take an image like this and you can go through it and you can tune each individual element that you wouldn't normally be able to do with just sort of overall type adjustments. So I'm going to create a new variant. All right. So let's see, new variant. We're going to actually create a new variant. What that's going to do is it's going to erase any of the settings that were in there. And then in your editing palette, now you may be more familiar with the tools on the left. So if you go to Windows, Workspace, and Default, here we go. This is what you're used to seeing when you first launch Capture One. I don't know where anything is in the default mode, so I have a custom workspace. But basically, you've got these little tabs up here at the top that'll be pretty much the same. And so I will show you how to get there. So we're going to go back to Workspaces. We're going to go back to, we'll do my default R1. There we go. And I go all through how to set up your workspace, how to save it, how to customize it in the course. There's a lot of back-end stuff that we can do in Capture One that isn't as fun and sexy as editing images. Okay, so let's get playing with this image. So I'm going to go to the editing palette. I'm going to look at layers. If any of the tools that you want to see are not in your column, all you have to do is right click and say add tool, and then you can add any of the tools that you want. So for example, if I want to add, say, the focus tab, which I don't really need, now I have the focus tab down here, and you can drag it out. You can move it around, put it on another window if you want. So if you don't see a tool in there that you want, then that's how you would do it. You can also go up to Window and say create floating tool. And for example, like here was that focus one, and that's just the same thing. And then if I want to dock it, I can just drag it and drop it right over here. Just like that. I can put it right up there in the dock, but we don't need that. So I'll remove that tool. Okay. Now I know there's some text coming in, so it's hard for me to read those. So Frederick, jump in if there's anything that I slide by that we need to get.
I'm watching. Yeah, otherwise we'll save them to the end for the Q&A segment.
Yeah, okay. Awesome. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're just going to make some selections. So if you haven't updated to Capture 21 and you're on version 20, there's some tools in here that you don't have that you'd need to upgrade to, and that right here is this brush called the Magic Brush. And basically, what that does is it selects based on color and tonality as well. So it's a little bit of both. So this works in black and white. So for example, if I want to grab just the sky, so I can right click. Now, each brush is specific to the layer that it's being used on. So, and I'll show you how that works. So I'm going to set my tolerance to say 10. And basically that says, I'm going to look at more colors near the ones that I'm picking. And I'm just going to draw, you can't really see the mask, but I just kind of drew in the sky. And I hit M to show my mask. See if I turned it off. There it goes. So there's what it selected. And I want to grab a little bit more of that up there in the right corner. And I want to grab some of this down here. Now notice how it's darker in the second selection. And that's because my opacity is set at 50%. So the cool thing is that you can actually do this in layers. So for example, if I want to turn the opacity way down, and I want to just kind of paint over the whole image, you can see it's really thin on the mask. It's barely there. But if I want to paint again and paint again, it's going to get darker. Now that's in the lighter areas. So maybe I want to leave the darker areas of the clouds alone. That's fine. I can do that. Or if I can come in and say, well, the darker clouds only get a little bit, and I can just keep adding it and adding it. So now basically we have a layer, and we'll come over here to a layer range and we'll call this one sky. So now what I can do to the sky, hit M, turn off the mask. I can make it warmer. I can make it colder. I can apply any of the settings that I want to apply. And that's one of the things that I really love about these layers is that I have access to all the adjustments, almost 99% of all the adjustments available. Some black and white adjustments and some lens correction adjustments don't apply to a layer, but hopefully that's getting fixed in the future. So that's the sky. So now I want to select like just the roof of this barn. Now I'm going to set the tolerance lower because I think that it's a lot of similar colors in there. So I'll just paint over the barn roof. Oops. Here's where my mistake was. I have to create a new layer. So go to the plus sign, new empty layer. We'll call this like the roof. Oops. I can't spell. Now everybody knows, and it's all recorded that I can't spell. Oops. No. Okay, there we go. All right. So I'm going to turn the opacity up so we can see it, make the selection, but I'm just going to paint right in the roof. See, wait for a second. There it goes. And you can see that it grabbed that roof almost perfect. So now what I can do with that, I can turn the mask off so I can see the effect that's happening. But maybe I want to make the roof a little bit brighter. Can make it a little bit brighter. Maybe I want to make it warmer. You know, whatever I want to do, I can select. Now, the selection is actually pretty darn good because I can come over here to the tree. Let me open up this palette. So up in the corner of each of your palettes, you have these three little option dots. And in there, you also have a sizing option. So you can do an auto size, large, medium, and small. Sometimes auto makes it too big. So if you run out of room in your palettes, you can adjust it that way. So I'm going to make a new one. We'll call that tree. There we go. Now I was really surprised when I was playing with this that it actually grabbed the tree. And I'm going to leave the selection really low. And I'm just going to click. I'm not going to paint. Let's see what it did. There it goes. So it you can see how it grabbed the tree pretty nice. We have a little bit of overflow over there, which I can grab the eraser tool. I can come in and clean that up. Right click, opacity. There we go. Awesome. So now you turn off that mask. So now I can kind of mess with that tree a little bit. So if I want to bring the brightness up of just the tree, I don't want it to be unnatural, but I want you to be able to see the changes. So I can make that tree kind of stand out. The exposure is too much. I think the brightness works better. And then by the same token, I can also do the background. So this will be the last one I'll show you here. Oops. That's what happens when you start typing before your layer's ready. There you go. And this is just a way to select different areas of your image to create different layers. So we'll turn the mask on. Let's see how that did. I have the tolerance set pretty low. Yeah, it's probably too low. So let's do that again. Right click. I'm going to set the tolerance to 10. Good. I'm going to paint through here. There you go. Might take a little bit of that one and kind of fill that in right there. I like it. But you can see how in the sky up here, it did a really good job right at the top of that hill, selecting those trees. Turn that off. And I'm assuming because it's in the shade, it's going to be a little bit cooler. And I'm going to turn the brightness down. Trying to keep it, again, trying to get it to feel natural, but be able to make selections within that image. So once you've made all these selections and you have all these different layers over here, which I think is, again, one of my favorite things is being able to have these layers, is I can go in and make changes to those. So if I wanted to, on the sky, go back in and I wanted to add clarity, more clarity, or some dehaze, I could do that and make an effect in that sky. So that right there, that's the magic brush. So that's one of the new things that has come out in Capture 21, Capture 121. Let me show you another.
Hey, Troy, before you move on from that magic brush, just a real quick question. So Lightroom has an adjustment brush in it with, you know, the tools to smart select feature or color ranges and all that. Is this more powerful than that, or is this a reimagining of that tool?
This is actually more powerful than that because of the tools that it works with. So for example, let me make a new layer and we'll call this, we'll call this barn. And I'm gonna basically select the whole barn. Let me see, we'll hit brush. Okay, so you see how it selected all that brown in there. Mm-hmm. Now, the nice thing about what I have now with my selections is I can go in and I can apply a Luma range to it as well, this is not something I don't think you can do in Lightroom. It's hard for me to speak to Lightroom. I haven't touched it in a while. But for example, now I can go into any one of these layers, go to Luma range, and I can tweak the selection that I made based on color, now based on luminosity as well. So in that color range, if I only wanted to select a particular tonal range, so now I can do that as well. So it gives me a lot more control.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Hope that answers your question.
It does.
Let me turn this off. One of the things that I mentioned earlier about brushes being specific to your layers. So when you go in and you want to create a new layer, and I'm just going to do a regular brush. It says, brush with layer. And what that means is that this brush is linked to this layer. So for example, if I come in here and that brush is going to be that big and that dense, that's going to be connected to this layer. If I make a new layer and I make the brush that small, right? And you could assume I changed the density as well, it's going to be that small. So when I switch back to that other layer, that brush comes back with it. That brush comes back with it. So whatever you've got going on with that brush or with that particular layer, that brush now carries across with that layer. And I believe that this is a recent addition. I don't remember if it came out in 20 or 21, but it's one of those kind of tools that you don't really appreciate until you've got a lot of layers going on in an image and you're jumping back and forth and you making sure that your brushes are matching. So that's nice. One of the other things that happens is once you've made a selection, let's just say like the sky, for example, and I'm actually going to go ahead and select this even darker so we can see it happen. Now that I painted across it, it should make a better, there we go. So better selection. So now what I can do is I can also come over here to say custom styles. Okay. And I can see what they look like just by dragging over. And if I want, I can right click and say apply to selected layer. So now I can apply that effect or that style only to the layer that I've created through the magic brush and or additional adjustments through luminosity masking. So notice that's the whole range. Let's say I want to clip out highlights, so I only get mostly the shadows from the clouds in there. And that's the lower triangle here is the toe, how much it fades off. So I'll say, okay. So now the blue is predominantly in the shadows of the image. And this is infinite. You can just, this just goes on forever. You can just keep tweaking and finessing, but that's one of my favorite tools that I use that quite a bit. And let me show you what this looks like. Oop. Let's go back. Here it is. So there's our image. And that's kind of our before and after. I know it's kind of ridiculous. This guy doesn't really look like that, but the barn looks pretty nice and the tree gets some nice separation. Now, if you see any tools in this upper toolbar that you don't have or that you don't want, all you have to do is right click, customize toolbar, and then anything that you either want to add or you want to pull out, that's where you do it there. There's a couple things that are missing that I think are pretty important from the default. And I wish I could remember exactly everything that's missing without switching back and forth, but you can add them here. So for example, this up arrow and this down arrow, and then this double-ended arrow, that's basically a copy and apply, and then a copy and paste. And I don't think they're in there by default. I really like them there. And then the reset adjustment, which is this arrow right here. So you can put them up here, you can drag them around. You can drag things out if you don't want them up there. You can put them back. You can put them anywhere you want. And then once you spend all that time and you organize that bar, you want to go to Window, Workspace, and save your workspace. It'll drive you nuts when you pop out and you pop back in or something happens, you get an update and your workspace is gone. That's no fun. So make sure you do that. All right. So let's move along to a couple of other images. Let me go ahead and get into a different folder. We're going to go over here to Corey and Jessica's wedding. There we go. Where'd they go? There we are. All right. 4269. I know it's one of these. Here it is. So one of the other tools that I like a lot are the style brushes. Now the style brushes, they come with a default built-in style brush, basically. So down here in the lower right-hand corner, here, I'll drag it up in the screen for you. So built in, they have a color brush. And basically what this brush does is it creates a layer and it adds more cool, more warm, more saturation or less saturation. I'll just show you how that works. So for example, let's say that I want to make this cooler. So big brush, I start painting, doing that quite a bit. If we go to the adjustments tab, you can see it created a tab or a new layer called balance color. And that brush now matches that. So now if I want to do something that has less saturation, I can do the same thing. I can just paint over here and the saturation comes out. And this is not looking beautiful, of course, but she's an awesome bride. She's very cool. So she'll tolerate me doing this to her. So now you can see that there's a layer in there that says desaturation. So how would you use this? Like how do I use this? Because we got cool tools. We want to be productive. We don't just want to sit and play all the time. So one of the things that I do is I have custom styles that I use a lot. So for example, I would probably apply one of these, like that one right there, which is just a concoction of adjustments that I happen to like. I'll make it nice and bright. Maybe bring the saturation down a little bit. Now I want something to go high key, but I don't want the corners or the veil to blow out. So what I've done is I've created my own styles or my own style brushes, and you can create these very easily. Set the settings that you want on the brush. Don't include things that you absolutely don't need. So for example, if you only want to bring up the highlights or the shadows or bring down the highlights and the shadows, you start with an image. We'll just come over here. I'll reset this image 100%. So let's say I want to set something that's like minus whites by like 35%. Just turn down that one specific tool. And then under the style brush, under the style brush palette, again, if you don't see it here, you can come up to Window, Workspace, or Create Floating Workspace and look for style brush down there. Okay. And then in the top right-hand corner, you got the little option buttons. Oh, and it's not going to let me save. Oh, I know why. I actually have to apply it. So apply it. It creates that layer. Then you can say, save style brush. And once you save the style brush, it goes into your palette over here. Now in the course, and it's too complicated to show you right now, I can show you how to reorganize all of your styles and your style brushes and your presets and your workspaces all at the file level, because you can't do it within Capture One. So in my workflow, what I'll do is I'll get like the eyes kind of close to where I want, but the corners are too bright. So I'll just come in, I'll grab brightness, like -15. Notice the brush size is already set for what I want. And I just brush in that corner a little bit, brush in the lower left-hand corner a little bit. If you want to see the mask, just hit M. You can see where I painted. I can go in a little bit more if I want to fill in any gaps. So there you go. So I pulled that down. And then I have like eye punch. It's nice and small because it's meant to fit inside the eyes, but it also works on eyelashes. And it's ignoring the highlights. So as I'm editing an image, I'll just do this real quick. I'll just hit those areas and I'm done. So you can kind of see that's a quick application of a style, like a preset, and the style brush. So if you're coming from Lightroom, Lightroom calls anything that you save that has settings in it, they call it a preset. In Capture One, presets actually speak to each individual tools. You can actually save settings in those individual tools. So high dynamic range, I can actually save a setting, and that would be called a preset. I don't have one set in there. A multiple set of tools or a multiple set of adjustments is called a style. So if you hear that different term, that's what that means. So that's style brushes. Now, aside from style brushes, we talked a little bit about doing the Luma masking. And we need to mix all these things together. So the cool thing is you want to get used to Capture One. You want to get used to how the tools work, get used to how Capture One thinks. And then you can apply all of these tools to an image. So for example, like this image right here, and I'll just turn up the exposure a little bit more. So like in this case, if I just wanted to grab her dress, just the highlight of the dress, because maybe I want to add some warmth to it, or I want to do some detail recovery, or I want to add some more clarity or dehaze. One of the ways that we could do that, we already saw how we could do that with like a magic brush, right? But the magic brush is going to be grabbing a lot of stuff. Okay, see, because I scraped it across the screen. There we go. But one of the things that I can do is I can do Luma Range. Now, what you want to do is you want to click on the plus sign. Now, this time we want to do a new filled adjustment layer. And basically what that's doing is selecting the entire image. And then through Luma Range, I'm going to say, I want you to clip out all the shadows. And we'll bring out that shadow there a little bit. There we go. So now I've really grabbed, all the highlights that are in there. And if I want to erase the rock, I just hit the eraser tool. Make the brush bigger. Let's change the brush density, the opacity. There we go. And again, just erase that. And you get the idea. So I can grab just her dress. So now if I want to pull down the whites or the highlights, I can do that. And it's not going to affect the other whites and highlights in the image anywhere. So let's There you go. Hope you can see how that changes in there. Kind of subtle, but yeah, there we go. All right. So let's move on to a couple other my favorite tools. Let's get over here. Let's go back to landscape. And here we go. Do we have any questions, Frederick? We doing okay?
Yeah, we're doing great. Yeah. So yeah, keep going. We got about 10 or 15 more minutes before we jump into the Q&A.
Yay. Okay. So many things in my head that I want to share. One of the other really, really powerful tools in Capture One is the new Dehaze tool. And so basically, this is how this image came out of camera. And I just wanted to tweak it a little bit. So let me just bring up that brightness. Now, the dehaze in Capture One works differently than it does in Lightroom. So in Lightroom, it's just kind of mid-tone contrast kind of thing, and it just kind of works everywhere. In Capture One, it's actually based on a color. So you have shadow tones, which you can either choose manually or auto. So I'm just going to show you the difference. So like on auto, we can kind of see how it changes the image. It's like, okay, that's not too bad. But I can grab the eyedropper and I can click around the image and it will change what it is that it's focused on. So where dehaze is being applied the most. So the nice thing is that it's not always the same. It's not always what you think it's going to be. So in this case, if I just crank this up, it's like, oh, it darkens the shadows and the sky looks okay. But what if I poke around? You know, will it make any changes that I'm happy with, like the foreground? I don't know if you can see that changing in there, but so with the dehaze, you really want to poke around as much as you can. So like, here we go. See if we turn. So one of the tricks is just turn up the dehaze nice and high. And it has a lot of effect. So it goes crazy. It like metamerizes and does all kinds of crazy things. And then just poke around in there a little bit and see where this goes. And oftentimes auto is pretty solid, but a lot of times I'll find something in there that I like better. Like this one, a lot of the tones are the same, so we're not really going to see a big effect in there. There we go. So you can play with that. Now, the other thing that happens a lot is I need to select images and make adjustments to the tones and the color balance in that image. So there's a couple ways that we can do that. So under the color editor, we have basic, advanced, and skin tone. I'm not going to get into the skin tone, but basically what you can do with that is you can select a skin tone if there's a little bit of like a color deviation or a tonal deviation or hue. You can help correct that. So if somebody's hot that day and they got little red marks on their face or something, that can help a lot. But basically the big use for this is the basic. This is new in Capture 21, I believe. I could have the versions off, 20 or 21. It's fairly new. But basically what we're going to do here is we grab this little eyedropper tool in the bottom, click in the color that we want, drag up and down, changes my hue. If I drag, and I'm just holding down with a pen or holding down with a click of your mouse, left and right is saturation. And then for me, control, let me see if I got it right. Option, there it is. So we're gonna have to look at it. So this little menu, I messed with this recently. So what happens is when you click, you drag up and down. Oh, left and right is your brightness. It's whatever you want it to be. Here, let me reset it. So hue is vertical, up and down. Saturation is horizontal. And then lightness would be your alt horizontal. And the way that I use this, let me just reset that real quick. Now that I made a mess of that, is I'll come in and I'll grab a color or grab a sky and I'll say, well, I want this to be a little bit more cyan. So hue is vertical. So I'll just click and hold and I'll drag this up or down. Okay, it's not behaving. Do I have, I broke something. It's always when we do live demos, right? Okay. Well, there it goes. I'm getting a little lag. So there's my lightness. And then up and down will change your hue, which would be this little guy right here. I don't know why it's not responding to me now. Aside from that, let me move over here to a different image. Here we go. So aside from that, let's say that you want to select just the green or just the blue hues in this image, and when you want to make a layer from those particular colors. So you would go to Advanced, grab the Eyedropper tool. I turned it off. There we go. Select in the green. Now this triangle represents the width of the triangle represents the colors that you're grabbing. And then how much of the triangle you have is how much saturation of the color that you're grabbing. Right down here, there's a couple little wedges. You can select the inverse of what you've got, or you can select the entire wedge, which is the pie right there. That's the whole wedge. And then you can make some adjustments here. So I can adjust the hue right here if I want to. You can do the saturation here. Now, this is the feature. This particular tool is the feature that sold me on Capture One from the very beginning. So I could like desaturate that grass. I could make it darker, brighter, whatever I want to do. But here is where I found it to be really the most powerful. Is I will select. Let me just reset that. Let's do that again. So I will select that green, and then I will go to the three options, and I will say Create Mask from Layer Selection. So now what it's doing is creating a layer. I'm going to do another one where I'm going to select the blue. So you can see I've selected a good chunk of blue. That's good. The bigger the triangle that you have, the more data that you've selected in that selection. And then I'm going to do Create Mask. Okay, so now what it's going to do is going to create that. So now when I go back to my editing tab, I've got these two layers. If I hit M, you can see I've selected the blue, that's the background. And I've selected the green, that's the foreground, including the trees and everything. So now, instead of me just making that adjustments that I was going to do here in the wheel, now what I can do is I can make those adjustments here, and I have control over clarity, dehaze, levels, you name it. So let's say that I want to take the foreground and I want to make it a little bit softer, so I can use that clarity and pull that down. And I can pull my saturation down if I want. Then I can go to the sky, and let's say that that's too cold. I want to make it warmer, so I can warm that up. And then I decide, well, you know what? I don't want the foreground to be that saturated. I want the whole image to have a different look. So I can desaturate that foreground a little bit. And I change my mind. I want to bring the clarity back up, something like that. And then, of course, in any of these layers, if you needed to, and in this case, we really don't have a need to, but let's see if it does something. Yeah, let's see what it does. Like, let's say I want to get rid of those goats a little bit more. I could go into Luma Range and I could clip it even more. I could say, pull out more of those dark colors. Give me a little bit of that. Okay, I like that better. So I've clipped out, some of the darker tones that were there. Once that finishes. And then on any of the layers that you have, you can always go in and you can add more styles. I think that's going to wait. It's going to make me wait. I think I broke it, Frederick.
You broke Capture One?
I get too many things running all at once. Yeah, I don't know what it did. Cancel.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah. Oh, there it goes. Okay. Yay. So for example, like on this green, let's say that I want to apply a particular style. Let's see, I got some custom styles in here. So let's go down to anything. So you can use some of these for like inspiration. So let's say I like that old grit green. I can say apply to selected layer. Now what it's going to do is it's only going to apply to the area that was selected. So if we go back and we look at that layer, we can see that's what we've selected. Now in the layers, and again, I'm focusing a lot on layers because it's really one of the most important tools and the most powerful tools in Capture One, is once you've created a layer, if you right click on that, you have an option of inverting it. So in this case, if I've selected the grass, but I want to select anything that's not the grass, I can invert it. But most importantly, you can refine the mask, which what that does is it changes the selection points. It kind of softens the edges a little bit, kind of looks at some of the surrounding areas. Or you can go in and you can feather the mask, which I do this a lot, is I actually feather the mask a lot because I want it to have more of a natural look, especially if you're doing like linear or radial gradients. And there's the mask, and that's probably going to be a big task because I told it to do a big area and people are watching. So let me stop that. So there you go. So those are some of the main tools that I would use in Capture One. Now, if you're working with Photoshop, as I think we all are, the question comes up with, how do we get this in and out of Photoshop? And that's actually really simple, but there's a couple terms that are different. So basically right click on the image or the thumbnail. And I say on the image or the thumbnail because depending on what tool you're in, if you right click, it may bring up the tool palette to export, or it'll bring up, like, for example, if I have a brush tool, it brings up the context menu for the tool. So almost always just go to the thumbnail, right click. Now edit with or open with. They sound kind of the same, but they're very different. Open with means that it ignores anything in Capture One and just opens it in that application as if that file, that application is just opening the raw file, right? Like you were just handing the file to Photoshop and Photoshop's going to open a raw converter and everything. And we don't want that. That would be good if you had, say, like a PSD, like this image right here is a PSD and it's finished. And I applied no Capture One settings to it at all. I just want to open it in Photoshop. That would be an open with, right? But take an image like this, I've already applied, I like this one better. I've already applied some Capture One settings and I want to open it in Photoshop and continue working on it. That would be an edit with, and I'm going to say 2021. And this dialog box always pops up and it always defaults to the last setting that you gave it. I wish there was a shortcut for that. Capture One people. Okay, so now we're going to open this up in Photoshop. So this is called round tripping. So what we're going to do, and when I edit a job or I do reorders or anything, and I've got to jump back and forth between Capture One and Photoshop, this is exactly how I would do it. So this image is going to pop up in Photoshop. Let's say that I want to come in and I just want to do some quick retouching. Yes, I know the plugin doesn't work. So let's say maybe I'm going to crop it. And I'm going to do a little bit of retouching. There we go. Just to do something in there to change it. Yeah. Okay. That's really bad. Yeah. Don't do that. Those are really bad. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Command S, and on Windows, I think that would be Control S or save, right? File save. And I'm going to hit W to close it. Now, if we go back to Capture One, there's our file. You can see my horrible cloning. So that's round tripping. So now what that did was I took that image, I edited in Capture One, I got it to be tweaked to where I wanted it. And then I took it into Photoshop. And that's when you do like the pixel pushing and you do, sky swaps or whatever you need to do. Then you can bring it back into Capture One and it's done. And so there it sits. So now it's sitting in your library. For those of you who are using Lightroom or have used Lightroom and you liked the idea of stacking your images, Capture One is not doing that. And it's a feature that I missed, but you just get used to it. So yeah, you can't stack these images. So, Mr. Frederick, sir, we are
excellent.
10
You're good. Look at you.
7.
Look at you coming in right at perfectly at the time. That's perfect. Thank you. I've been taking notes.
Page of notes.
Yeah, I know. We should have done this for 2 hours. It's a dance though. You can't do it for too long, but it's always too short. That's how these things go. Let's blow through a couple of these questions first. Let's see. Michael Rhino. Hey, Michael Rhino. Michael Rhino says, within the Luma Range feature, does the magic brush allow dodging and burning for luminosity ranges, similar to the dodging and burning features within luminosity masks in Photoshop?
Ooh, that's interesting. Within the Luma Range
Yeah.
feature, does the magic brush? Well, the way that I imagine this working is, man, I would have to know like a specific use case for it, but let's just create a new filled layer. And so there's my mask, and I'm going to Luma range it to only grab, we'll just grab like mostly, actually, you know what? There's a lot of detail. Okay, so we're going to grab just the water. Okay. No, I don't think it's going to do anything for you here. I think what you could do is you could go back in and you could add some mask areas based on that mask. Like it should, like the magic brush should be adding to this, but you can't erase it. So the thing about the magic brush, and I'll go to another image. The thing about the magic brush is it layers up, but it doesn't layer back. So for example, if I set the opacity really low, and actually let me find you a different image. Okay. So if I select just this area up here where the shadows are, it's you can see it's selected only a little bit, but if I keep selecting, it keeps getting darker and it keeps getting darker. So it's layering. There's no way for me to go in, for example, and turn this opacity way down and then have it go backwards. So it's all about adding and removing layers.
Okay. All right. Next question is from Dennis. Dennis says, can you name workspaces so you can have different custom ones?
You can, yeah, absolutely. And there's actually a desktop bar feature up here that says desktops. They've removed a couple tools that I just used to love, but oh, here it is. So, all right. So first of all, that little tool right there can show you all your desktops, your workspaces really quickly.
Oh, sweet.
Also up here under Windows, under Workspace. So let's say, for example, this is a workspace I want to save. I just save workspace. I give it a name or give it a name over the top of something. So we'll just call this, test, because that's a clever name during a demo. So now when I go in there, there's that workspace. So I can very easily come in and switch from whatever you want.
That's cool.
And you can switch live. So
now this may be a weird question. Do the workspaces respect the presets or the settings in there? So for example, if you have a workspace set up specifically for your portraiture retouching and you use a specific set of tools and adjustments on a routine basis, can you switch to that workspace and have all those available versus when you're doing landscape or astrophotography or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So they've already got a couple in here for you. So for example, like the wedding workspace or the simplified workspace is for those of us that came over from Lightroom and we like to see our tools on the right. So yes. So if you're going to be going through, say, you're always going to be calling your images. And so I want to be in grid view, and let's put a bunch of images in the grid view. And, I only want to see, one particular palette that has, say, this information in it, right? And maybe this information is floating. Let's just create a floating window, just something random, like a histogram. Okay, we want a giant histogram floating in there. So I can go to Workspace. I can say Save Workspace, and I can call this Pudding because that's more clever than Test. And so now when I switch my windows on my working workspace, let's say I go back to my default and, I'm working. Apparently, see, I didn't save this one with these pieces over there. I want to go back to that one. I'm going to go back to Pudding and go back, click on it. Boom, there it is.
Now, does that go down to how deep does that go? So if I've created tools that have specific settings on them, and I've created presets for those tools like adjustment brushes and whatnot. Do the workspace configurations extend down to that level, or once I create my brushes and all that stuff, they're persistent throughout all the workspaces?
The latter. The tools are
Okay,
persistent throughout the workspaces. So like over here on the right, I have a palette that shows my style brushes. That's persistent through all the workspaces.
got it.
Also, what a lot of people don't realize is that on some of your tool palettes, like for, let's see, we'll do high dynamic range, for example. If I go in there under the 3 options and I click, you can see this says set as default for Z6 or apply defaults. So if I want that to be applied to that camera all the time, I can set that. So if I want to always have, say, highlights pulled down for, say, the Z6, I can say reset defaults for Z6 or save this particular setting. I don't want to mess it up because I have this set for my wedding images.
Yeah.
That's persistent through all your workspaces.
So then it's camera specific also. So then you can have settings for like your infrared modified cameras. So when you bring those images in, it automatically applies some secret sauce to get them to a base level for editing.
You would apply that on import, but basically all these tools in here would be the same. Persistently. Now, I only have one camera that's infrared, and that's a Z6. All my other cameras are Z6 Mark II and Z6 Mark 7, or I'm sorry, a Z7 version 2. So my infrared is only a Z6. So I have everything dialed in to only affect that for the Z6.
Okay, got it.
I imported other Z6 images, they would get the same setting though, because I don't know if it's serial number specific. I think it's model specific.
All right. Next, thank you for that. Next question is from Dan. Dan says, "Can you subtract with the magic brush?"
No, it's kind of a bummer. I mean, I love the fact that it selects. So it's always better to start with a lower layer and work your way up. If you have to erase, you're going to have to use the erase tool.
Okay.
So
no. Sorry, Dan.
Yeah.
Dwayne wants to know if he says, does Capture One see PSB? I don't know what PSB is. See PSB as image files as Lightroom does not. I'm not sure what PSB is.
A PSB is a Photoshop file. It's a very large file. Usually it's like over 2 gigs or something.
Okay.
I don't know. That's a good question, Dwayne. I've never made files that big, so I don't know. I will tell you, Capture One is pretty robust at seeing file types. They've gotten better over the last couple of years, so I can't tell you. Yeah, I can't tell you.
Another follow-up question from Dwayne is there a difference between Capture One and Capture One Nikon or other camera editions? Or are they like what is the difference between those specific editions?
There is no difference as far as functionality within the tools. The only difference is what files you can edit. So if you have the Sony version, you can't edit Nikon files. But other than that, the program works exactly the same. You have all the same tools. It's not like a light version. So if you only use one particular model or make, like a Nikon, or I think there's a Lumix version, there's a Sony version, then you don't need the full version. You can save a little bit of money.
Yeah. Okay. But then you're locked in, because if you decide, I'm switching to that camera brand, then you got the wrong version of Capture One. You're gonna have to invest and get that, right?
You can upgrade. There's a small fee to upgrade to the full version from the vendor specific version, and it costs the same. So if you're unsure, I have many cameras, many cameras, and many versions that go back many years. I need that.
Cover your bases.
Yeah.
Here's another question. Actually, this one is from me. I have a couple of them, which I'm sure you can rapid fire these. You're on a tablet. You're using a tablet, right? So,
yep.
Am I losing anything if I decide I want to use my trackpad or Magic Mouse? Or I know the answer is yes to that, and I guess another way to phrase the question is, can I get by with just my tablet and Magic Mouse, or do I have to invest in a Wacom tablet?
No, you can absolutely get by without the tablet. I only use a tablet maybe 10% of the time when I'm
Okay.
in Capture One. You really don't need it that much unless you're doing like heavy editing and you're painting a lot of masks, and pen pressure matters on the gradients within the pen itself.
Yeah.
But that's most of that stuff it's done in Photoshop. That's where you do a lot of your pixel pushing is in Photoshop.
Yeah. Just a couple of, I guess another quick question from me is, one of the reasons I have Capture One, obviously, I love it, I play with it. I'm interested in your course because I need to get better in it, but I don't want to spend the time learning how to get better in it. And that's not hyperbole. That is the truth. But one of the main things that holds me back from jumping in with both feet is digital asset management. Right. In Lightroom,
Right.
I can manage everything. I got folders here and there. I'm good. I'm relative peace of mind, notwithstanding the hardware that I'm storing my images on, but I'm good there. Capture One doesn't have digital asset management functionality, correct?
Oh no, it absolutely does. Yeah, in every sense of the word. I mean, you have smart albums, you have smart collections, you have virtual collections, you have
Oh,
keywords, stars, the metadata syncing. I mean, without getting too heavy into it, yes, you have all of that.
okay.
And I hate it when you watch a program and somebody says, yes, that's in my course. But it's in
That's
the
in my
course.
course. I hate it when people do that, but I'm going to
I'm
go ahead and
happy
do
to
that real
demo
quick.
it. Like, I'm happy to show you if you want me to do it. I don't have secrets. It's fine. I'm happy to share it. But yes, it has great
We don't
management.
have time. We don't have time for it, but it's in the
I know.
course. And I'll throw the link up for the course in the chat in a second. So the last question is exporting to third-party services. So that's another feature I use in Lightroom from time to time. I'm not sure if you do this or not. I'm pretty sure you don't. But being able to take an image set and push that up and sync it up to a SmugMug folder or Pixie Set or Slick Pick or something like that, being able to do that, do we have that functionality in Capture One, or are we relegated to export to a folder on the desktop and then upload to that service?
Well, there's two answers to that. The easy answer is no. There's not a lot of those generic plugins available.
Mm-hmm.
However, in the new export feature, and it's something that was in the old export feature, but it's more robust in the new export module, is that after you export, you can run an application. So you can create a workflow to mimic that, but there's not a plugin to just upload straight to Facebook from Capture One.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's no way to do that. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Folks, if you guys, if you have a question, go ahead and I believe you can throw your hand up, and by clicking on the little reactions button at the bottom of the Zoom window. So go ahead and throw your hand up if you have a question, and I will bring you on screen, or just read your question, or however you want to do it in the last couple of minutes we have here. And while we're doing that, I want to share a link to Troy's course that he put so much work into. That is in the chat. It is called Capture One Complete. Let me share my screen. I'll put it up there too so you can see it. It's called Capture One Complete. Troy, why don't you tell us about this course? Since I have you here, I don't have to beg you to read scripts so I can create sales videos.
Yeah, no, look, this course really just came about because in the TWIP community, we all share the things that we love, and I love Capture One. I love how it works for me. I'm not, just a fanboy of it, but I legitimately enjoy working in it. And so I was constantly sharing pieces, and I thought, you know what? I'm just going to go through I'm going to go through all the things. And
Yeah.
I literally just outlined like all the steps from how to set up your preferences to how to export to here's 3 or 4 images, how I would edit them and get crazy. I just documented that. It's I don't know how many chapters it is. It's almost 5 hours. So it's a lot of content. It's broken down, and that's what it is. It's just a basic walkthrough of these images. These are the images that I've used. So
That's cool.
yeah.
And
These
it's like
aren't
almost 5 hours, 4+ hours, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, for $97, and you support this guy. So yeah, go ahead and do it.
That's fun.
Cool. Any final thoughts before we wrap it up, Troy? I don't see any questions coming in. And Michael Rhino, a testimonial in the chat. Thank you, Michael Rhino, says Troy's course is very thorough and excellent. I'm only into chapter 5 now. I'm looking forward to remaining sessions. Yes. Dennis Dunbar says, take my money. Yes.
You guys are gracious. One of the things that we didn't get to touch on, but if you go to my Spicy Jello YouTube channel, or I may have touched on it in the course, or Frederick and I can touch on it later, is infrared. Capture One does an amazing job at editing infrared in a way that I've seen almost no other applications touch. And infrared is a lot more than just, I shot on an infrared camera, I'm going to convert it to black and white, couple sliders, and I'm done. There's colors in there, and there's stuff you can play with, and Capture One is the few tools that can actually,
you've been trying to get me to convert to infrared for what, 2 years? 2 years now, I think.
You know what? It's okay. It's okay if you don't, because Amy did. Eric has one. Michael Rhino has one. Joshua has one.
And by the way, speaking of that, I forgot to mention this. The folks that you just rattle off are members of the TWIP Pro community.
Yeah.
Which, when you purchase Troy's Capture One Complete, you get access to the base level of the TWIP Pro community as well. So you get, a group of people along with the course, which has its own little community inside of it. So just FYI. All right. Eric Kronsky. Yeah, Eric has his hand up. Eric, I'm gonna unmute you. And there you go. You're unmuted.
Hey, good evening, guys. That was terrific. Hey, I've got a question. I use Lightroom for my digital asset management, mainly because when I'm traveling, I back up on my iPad. The iPad sends it to Adobe's cloud. Then the cloud sends it right to Lightroom Classic, and that's beautiful. But I'd rather process those images in Capture One. And again, because of the now that I have the digital infrared camera, it's awesome. And I just like the way that images come out in Capture One better. And then I use the sessions for that. Is there any way to use the catalogs for both programs, or is that going to confuse things too much, or screw up metadata, or that kind of thing?
Yeah.
It's tough if you're going to keep your database in Lightroom. And I know there's a lot of people that do that because they've invested a lot of time in that database, and I respect that. I mean, it was a lot of work to move it into Capture One. Stick with that, stick with your database in Lightroom. It's robust, it's strong, and then use Capture One in sessions and you won't have any problem. But if you ever want to move your database from Lightroom into Capture One, you can do it. All the keywords go along with it. Your stars, your color codes, all that metadata goes with it. Just none of your edits come over from Lightroom. Now there is an import option that's supposed to be able to kind of see the edits. Just expect all the edits to go away.
Is that necessarily a bad thing, though? I wonder, both you, Eric and Troy, is that a bad thing that the edits don't come over? Because from what I'm hearing, the raw processing engine inside of Capture One is a little different than the one inside of Lightroom, right? So your mileage may vary in terms of the quality that you get out of those images by allowing Capture One to do the raw processing interpretation versus Lightroom, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like just I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh no. So what I did is I decided, I committed to moving not only all of my work, all my wedding work from Lightroom over to Capture One. So in that case, I basically had a cutoff and said, okay, no more images, no more weddings in Lightroom. They're only in Capture One. And for a while, I had to go back to Lightroom to finish those. My personal catalog, which had over 200,000 images, I said, you know what, I'm gonna fully move it over to Capture One. And so what I did was I went through Lightroom and I went to all my collections and I rendered them out as high resolution TIFFs and said, okay, that edit is locked in a TIFF, right? And then I just imported 1 year at a time into Capture One. Yes, all the settings, all the re-edits went away. All the keywords are there, all the stars were there. I had to go and create new smart collections. But what a great way to go through, and being hyper type A, I loved the idea of reorganizing my images.
Yeah. It's like Lego.
And I do it the other way around. I do the edits in Capture One and then export the TIFF and import that into Lightroom. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so it keeps Lightroom doesn't do anything. It doesn't change the image at all, provided you don't put a preset in there or something like that. But it works. Yeah, it'd be a lot of work to change it out.
Yeah,
it's a lot of work.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome, Eric. Thanks for popping in here. I appreciate you. Another question is from Dan Donovan. Dan, I've asked you to unmute. You have the floor, man. What's up?
Hey guys, I just wanted to tell you my story about using both Capture One and Lightroom. I used to use Aperture, and when Aperture went away, I compared the image quality between Lightroom and Capture One. I like Capture One, so I've been using that since 2014. But recently, the past couple of years, I really wanted to have my photos backed up online and also have access to them on devices wherever I am. So basically, whenever I finish a project, I'm a commercial photographer and shoot for a variety of clients. I'll export the high quality JPEGs and import them into the new cloud Lightroom. So that way the finished JPEGs are backed up online and I have access to them wherever I want. And then I'll actually go into Lightroom Classic and upload to PhotoShelter through Lightroom Classic, and to keep my client folders on PhotoShelter sync through Lightroom Classic. So I use both Adobe and Capture One, and it's really, to me, it works out well. I get a great quality output and then access to it wherever I want.
That's the holy grail, right? To figure out it sounds like you haven't figured out, Dan, but that flow of personal work, the stuff that you're shooting, like even like Troy, you and I were talking about this, like your friends and family, your iPhone stuff, just all the photos that you take that aren't client work, and then client work, and where does that go? And then if you're Troy, I don't think you do this, but if you're sharing client galleries online, how does that flow work with selects, and how do those selects make it back into your app so you can prepare the images for delivery? All of that, how do you, that is a matrix level egg right there.
It is infinitely diverse, and I commend anybody who has figured out a system that they like. Doesn't matter. Tutorial. It doesn't matter what software you use. Honestly, if you can locate your images and you know where they are and they're backed up, you're a winner.
Right. Right. Yeah, see how we slipped that thing in there, and they're backed up. So you have to back, that's the other foot to fall. Because if you have terabytes of images and you haven't backed up to the cloud, that's you're looking at another year or so to get stuff up into the cloud. Yeah. All right. I think we're at the end of this. Let me just throw this slide up again real quick in case you guys missed it. Troy's Capture One course there. So if you are at all interested in learning and taking what this guy has told you in this webinar to the next level ad nauseum, in fact, because every little nook and cranny you dive into in the course. So go check it out. It's at thisweekinphoto.com/capture1complete, or click on the link that I just put in the chat there, or that I'm about to put in the chat right here. There you go. Cool. I think that's it. Troy, do you have any, or Dan, do you have any, your hand is still up. Did we already answer your question, or is it just still up?
Sorry. No, I'm good. I just, I didn't I didn't do it. I'm good. Thanks.
Okay, all good. Well, we'll wrap it up with that. Troy Miller, I'm going to give you the last word, man. It's your show. Take us home.
Thanks. Thanks for hanging out with me and listening to me talk and let me share. And hope everybody's staying safe. And get to see you guys in TWIP. Tomorrow night for the hangout. If you're part of TWIP, we have a hangout tomorrow night. So I look forward to seeing you guys there. Every Friday.
But tomorrow's hangout is different. Tomorrow's meetup is different because the first half of it is all live image critique, and the second half of it is shooting the breeze about whatever. So it should be an interesting time. All right, we will leave it right there. Troy Miller, thank you for doing all that you do, and congratulations on the launch of your course, man. I know it's been a lot of hard work.
Thanks, Frederick.
All right,
thanks everybody.
All right, everybody. Have a good night. Enjoy your evening.